Gotta share with you just a quick note here, if I could. We've got a couple of different folks who are coming up on the program with us in the 9 o'clock hour, just after 9 o'clock news. Lance Clow, state representative from here in Twin Falls, will be joining us, spending a few minutes talking with us. Of course, these people are all up for re-election this year on the House side, and he'll share some of his thoughts. And I heard a great comment yesterday. I was talking with Grant Loebs off air, and he said that this time of year, this really comes down to, he said, politics is essentially just a job interview. And if you're already in politics, he said, the case you have to make is, why do I deserve a few more years? So hire me. And he said, because the public has a couple of choices. One, they can hire you, or two, they can simply turn around and they can fire you. And so all these candidates who are joining us are simply just, they're laying out their accomplishments so far and what they plan to do in the future. Also, Steve Millington will be joining us in a few minutes from the Twin Falls County Republican Party, and he has some experience in that area as well. I have to share with you a couple of things to open the show from a website called The Christian Post. Facebook tells woman to remove posts opposing men in women's bathrooms. Now, this has become a story that's getting a lot of traction around the country because some states have said no, other states have said yes. Washington State being one of those more liberal states where people say yes. And this woman, of course, lives in Washington State. She ended up going to Facebook and she posted a picture of herself. She's got a number 3 Seahawks jersey on. She's holding a football and a Seahawks helmet, and there's a sign with her picture, and it says, "Does this make me Russell Wilson?" And then she put up another picture where she's dressed as a pirate, and she's holding a sign and says, "Does this make me Russell Wilson?" Then there's a photograph of a purse, a pinafore, and a couple of high heels, and it says, "This does not make you a woman." So she put these things up on her Facebook page. 111,000 people have either liked it or shared it at this point. Now, that means that it got picked up by a lot of her friends and then the friends of friends, and it went viral. Facebook is not pleased. Facebook has told her they want it removed. When she asked for an explanation, they said it contains nudity. Even though in all of these photographs, she is fully clothed, the only thing nude might be her neck and her face and her hands. So someone out there is trying to remove this because they are deeply offended, and they're using any means necessary, including even lying about the photographs. If Facebook would take a look at them, people who've sent her the warning, and actually could see them, they would see that the complaint doesn't have any bearing. We have to understand, though, Facebook is a service that we use for free. We share all sorts of details on it, but it's not necessarily ours. It's a bit like Curt Schilling being fired by ESPN for making a couple of comments about the very same issue on his Facebook page. Curt Schilling's employer can make that decision. Doesn't mean it's right, but an employer should be able to make that decision. This is from Eric Erickson at The Resurgent, when crazy takes to the streets. He says the Today Show ran a story with a perfectly serious tone about an 8-year-old girl who is gender fluid, sometimes going by Abby, but sometimes by Scott or Adam. And the Today Show, that is NBC News, treated this as if it was legitimate. In North Carolina, he writes, liberals are boycotting the state because the legislature actually had to pass a law that said men use men's bathrooms. The legislature had to legislate common sense because liberals insisted that even churches and mosques provide bathrooms for men who want to use the ladies' room. I think in a mosque that could be deadly, but we'll bring that up perhaps another day. A kid that can't decide, he writes, between pizza and chicken nuggets is not competent to decide that he really is a member of the opposite sex. And he writes, if your kid is eating Tide laundry pods and dying, it's your fault because you failed as a parent. It is not Tide's fault. It looks like candy to the kid, but adults know it isn't and shouldn't have it around the house, easily accessible to kids. So this little girl, she will grow up saying, well, I'm either Adam or Scott or Abby. And then when she's in high school and she realizes that she is Abby and all the kids are making fun of her because on YouTube there are still videos of this story floating around from when she was 6 years old, she can thank her mom for all of the verbal abuse she will take at school. Mr. Erickson says you do not have to give in to every whim of children and indulge every fantasy. It's called parenting. The people who love science and have embraced science as their God are rejecting basic biology. That is the key here. Think about this. Liberals tell us, well, if I can't see it, it can't be true. So they reject certain teachings of the Bible. They call most of it myth, if not all of it myth. They tell you, well, global warming is settled science. They tell you that abortion is settled law. They bring up all of these things all the time, but he's pointing out, he says, the people who love science, and once again, as he writes, have embraced science as their God, are rejecting basic biology. In other words, whatever suits them today, and that is to argue that if you think you're a woman and you like to use the ladies' room and you are a man who's got 3 days of stubble, go ahead and use the ladies' room. Speaking of Curt Schilling, the Wall Street Journal, William McGurn writing in support of him. The title of the column there today called Curt Schilling, the Science Guy. Speaking of calling it science, well, the writer McGurn says, let us note the irony, Schilling's main contention, a man is a man no matter what they call themselves, is supported by DNA and those pesky X and Y chromosomes. In short, in this fight between science and authority, Schilling is in the amusing position of being the Galileo, with ESPN filling in for the Holy Office. Paul McHugh, former psychiatrist-in-chief for Johns Hopkins Hospital, puts it this way. Curt Schilling is, of course, correct with the science in saying that claiming to be a woman when you have the chromosomal and anatomical structures of a man does not make you such. You're still a man no matter what you think or how you dress. Again, that is from a respected doctor and a psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins University Hospital, one of the best hospitals and teaching hospitals in the country. Mr. McGurn writes, it contradicts the dominant narrative in which the Democrats take their positions from a clear-eyed look at the science while Republicans are blinded by their religious, social, and economic orthodoxies. In other words, it shows you the hypocrisy of liberal America when we discuss these things. Bill Colley with you on Top Story at News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You could reach our program today by dialing 736-0300, 736-0300. Now, we look at places like Idaho and we say this will be the last place that something like that would ever happen. Our legislature will not go along with such a kooky idea. But you're going to have people who will show up in Boise this coming session, this coming year, and they will demand this because monkey see, monkey do. They've seen it done somewhere else, and they think they'll be able to get away with it here. And you know what'll happen? The editorial boards at places like the Idaho Statesman and various other papers around the country will come out and say, it's the right thing to do, as if somehow that they have cornered righteousness. And then that drumbeat will continue. And then all of the people working in media, in radio, TV, and newspapers, and I'll tell you what, radio not quite so bad as the others because radio is somehow viewed, I guess, by many of the young people today as being a media backwater. But I know this from my own experience. When we first saw the homosexual agenda get roaring in the 1990s, that was because in newspapers and TV newsrooms around the country, they loaded up those newsrooms with people of that persuasion. I kid you not. Some of them are now working at the network level. They were people I worked with. I can name them. I won't go through that today, but sometimes when I turn on the morning shows, CBS and NBC, and sometimes even the evening shows, I see these very same people that I used to work with or compete with on the streets when I was working in television. It was an effort. It was a planned effort. Cal Thomas has said that he would go to various newspaper offices to visit because he's in 600 newspapers around the country. So he makes promotional visits because of his column being the most successful newspaper column in America. And by the way, funny that we should note that it is among the most conservative and Christian of all of those newspaper columns. And yet newspapering, the people who run it, they still don't get it. They still, of course, come along and say, well, yes, but Cal Thomas, controversial, and lots of people read him, but of course he's wrong. And Cal Thomas says when you go into these offices and you see job postings, he said that they encourage people of alternative lifestyles to apply. So when you loaded the media up with people who said, well, this is an alternative lifestyle and it's right and it's good and you're wrong and you're a bigot if you make fun of it and you don't support us, you're intolerant, they managed to push the ball downfield and they used their influence in media to convince large swaths of the American public that this was indeed right. And now we've moved on to the notion that if you're a man and you like to wear dresses and you claim that you're a woman, that you can use whatever restroom you want. Don't you see what's going on here? And they're knocking down one taboo after another in order to get what they want. And I think Eric Erickson made a good point about this. Satan doesn't like opposition. Satan will denounce opposition and call it intolerant until Satan rules the day. And that happens to be the direction that we're headed. Also, this from the Daily Caller today: Obama appointee to activists, White House aggressively engaged in transgender fight. I saw a few jokes on Facebook about the First Lady this morning. I won't indulge in those. But a top Obama appointee in the Department of Education personally assured a group of LGBT activists — I used to think that meant bacon, lettuce, and tomato, and someone had just confused the lettering — that the White House is aggressively engaged in the fight to allow transgender students to use whichever bathroom they please at school. Her name is Catherine Lehman. The event was co-sponsored by an activist group called Equality Michigan. This is the other part of it. They adopt terms such as equality. Who's against equality? Therefore, you should allow us to go in and squat on the potty next to your 3-year-old daughter, because that would be equality. And it says they have led a statewide charge in Michigan to allow school children to choose their name, gender, and bathroom, all without parental knowledge or input. So you as a parent will be removed from the equation. Think about that. If you go back to communist Russia and Nazi Germany, the state came in and took over all of these aspects and essentially said the parents will no longer have any say in this because we are going to indoctrinate the children on our own. Officials from 7 different federal agencies attended this event, according to the Equality Michigan website. Speaking about the Obama White House, Lehman told attendees, "We are serious. We are aggressively engaged. We will enforce Title IX." The Daily Caller has filed a FOIA request with the Department of Education for her full remarks. In other words, the government is sandbagging the media from finding out exactly what she said, or all of what she said, which should make you question altogether why the government would be so tight-lipped about this one. Perhaps because they know that the American public is suddenly starting to say, whoa, wait a minute. So now they can't be so public about it. Now they're going to do the backdoor approach, no pun intended, to try to get into those restrooms with those grown men. 19 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And finally, before the break, the Daily Signal reports that the Oregon bakers who lost their business because they would not cater a same-sex wedding are challenging a judge's gag order. They are not allowed to speak about their case, despite having First Amendment liberties that the rest of us supposedly are guaranteed by God. So they are now challenging that. Why can't they speak? Because if they did, they might come across to the public as sympathetic, which they are, and the public might start to say, well, wait a minute. Maybe they shouldn't have to participate. And the government, the liberals running many of these governments, can't have that. Steve Millington will be joining us in just a few minutes. He's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. We got a lot to talk about today. Lots of political news on the state and the national level. I guess you could say local level, too, with primary coming up in just a couple of weeks right here in Idaho.